Hey, Jack, what you doing?
I'm just cutting up some carrots for my famous straponi in white bolognese.
Well, be careful. Remember what happened to Teresa.
Oh, Jesus. Damn it. God damn it.
Oh, God, did you cut off your fingers?
No, I forgot the time. Could you pick up some for me?
Here, I have some spicy purple water. Just use that.
And then we were fused together.
Ew. But who reassimilates who?
It's true. Who's the dominant fuser? Who's the dominant alpaca? That brings us to our wild and crazy film for this episode. Why don't you tell us a little about it?
Yeah, so this week we watched Color Out of Space, which is directed by Richard Stanley. It was released September 7th, 2019. Screenplay by Richard Stanley and Starlet Amaris. And it's based on The Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft.
The budget was anywhere between $6 and $12 million. And the box office was $1 million.
Perfect.
Hit right dead in the pandemic. IMDb gave it a 6.2 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it an 86, and Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it an 82.
Yeah, so kind of well reviewed. Yeah. I would say the same. When I was checking it out on Letterboxd, most of the people I follow gave it 3 to 4 stars, except for one person who gave it half of 1, which
I can understand both of those.
I don't know that it deserves a half star, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah. Give us some trivia about this, Jack.
Well, the thing that hit me first, and I see you have some stuff about it too, is that this movie was directed by the man who wrote the screenplay to The Isle of Dr. Moreau, which makes a lot of sense. At least explains 10% of the weirdness of this movie. Yeah,
for sure. And yeah, so Richard Stanley, this is his first return to feature films since The Island of Dr. Moreau. He was originally set to direct that and was booted off pretty early on into the filming of it and was replaced by John Frankenheimer. And it's a really epic story, which could take up a whole podcast just in and of itself. But there's a documentary called Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. It's a mouthful, which is kind of a lo-fi doc, but the story is really interesting. Richard Stanley stayed on the island where they were filming and tried to spy on the production. There's a lot to it.
Interestingly, also that is based on an H.G. Wells novel.
Yeah.
So he's sort of steeped in that sort of era of horror sci-fi.
Yeah, and then another little bit kind of related to that is that in Color Out of Space, there's a scene where Nic Cage turns on a classic film and he's kind of referencing oh, this was one of your favorites, to the photo of his dad. And so I'm pretty sure it's One-Eyed Jacks, which is directed by and starring Marlon Brando, who was in Dr. Moreau. He played Dr. Moreau. Right. So it's a little connection there. Although I saw someone else online say it was Mutiny on the Bounty, but I'm pretty sure it's One-Eyed Jacks. Anyway, it's one of those, and they both star Marlon Brando.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of little Easter eggs. At one point, the character Ward, he's reading a book called The Willows. He kind of throws down this book, and the camera just touches the cover for a second. And so The Willows is a novella by an English author named Algernon Blackwood, which was H.P. Lovecraft's one of his favorite works, and he considered it the finest supernatural tale in English literature. So yes, this is very H.P. Lovecraft, and I should give a little I don't know, warning or kind of disclaimer that H.P. Lovecraft is a huge asshole. He was horribly racist. He lived early early 1900s. He was born in 1890. He died in 1937, and he spent his whole life mostly in Providence, Rhode Island. He wrote all these very strange horror sci-fi things, but a lot of them were touched by this racism, basically, and white supremacy. And when Hitler was coming up, he was also a man of letters. He wrote thousands and thousands of letters to various other authors. And so there's a lot of documentation of him being like, this Hitler guy seems pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And then he would have like caricatures of black people in his books. He used the N-word in the titles of some of his poems. And he once said that black people were created by God as a semi-human form between man and beast. So, you know, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm kind of choosing to look at this as a Richard Stanley movie and not an H.P. Lovecraft movie. I know it's based on the story, but, you know, I've never read the story, so I honestly would never have known.
And H.P. Lovecraft is kind of having a resurgence, and I think Lovecraft Country, which was on HBO, did a really good job of like enjoying the stories of H.P. Lovecraft while also sort of coming to terms with the racism inherent in it in a really amazing way. So I read the book a long time ago, Lovecraft Country, but the series is one of my favorite. Like that and Watchmen were just like amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, had you heard of this movie?
I had. So this was actually one of the last movies I was going to see in theaters before COVID. And I can't remember why, but I had to cancel my ticket. But it would have been cool to see on the big screen with all of the like colors and effects. But but like, yeah. So what about you? Did you know of the movie or just the story or?
I did. I saw the trailer and it was very much in my wheelhouse. And for some reason, even up until like a few days ago or like a week ago when I looked up the movie, I thought this was a Panos Cosmatos movie. Are you familiar with his stuff?
I know.
Yeah, I mean, because he just did Mandy with Nic Cage in a very similar sort of like man goes crazy.
Right. So I think I saw somewhere that it's the same producers as Mandy.
Oh, okay.
But different director.
Right. And so his first movie, Beyond the Black Rainbow, also has a lot of similarities to this movie. There's like mystical goop, there's psychedelic colors, sort of retro sci-fi horror. So yeah, I had been meaning to see it, but I had not seen it yet. Yeah, do you want to break down the plot for us?
Sure, this is the shortest plot breakdown I think we've had, so you're getting good at this. After a meteorite lands in the front yard of their farm, Nathan Gardner and his family find themselves battling a mutant extraterrestrial organism that infects their minds and bodies, transforming their quiet rural life into a technicolor nightmare. Yeah,
this is very succinct because I got it straight from their press release.
Oh, great. Yeah, so this movie is gross.
This movie is gross and super weird.
It is extremely gross. I mean, I was into it, but like there were some super nasty moments and just lots of goop. And
yeah.
And
I'd say like right around the halfway point, I had no idea like what was going to happen in this movie. Like I knew bad shit was going to happen,
sure.
But like it's been a while since I've been so like watching a movie and just like, I have no idea what's about to happen. Like many, many things could happen. Many of them involve alpacas.
Yeah. The alpacas, that was a choice.
It's the meat of the future, man.
And yeah. So a quick note that I read, because I know we both kind of took note of the fact that Nic Cage's accent shifts throughout the movie.
Yeah.
So apparently Richard Stanley's favorite Nic Cage performance is from Vampire's Kiss.
Obviously.
Which explains so much, because he does, like, when he kind of starts doing the weird affected accent, it sounds exactly like his accent in Vampire's Kiss.
Like,
like
the
intellectual staccato. He's like, ooh. Like, I'm trying to remember one of the things he says, but he's like, there is nothing fucking up this family, or something like that. He's so much. And actually, I saw someone write online, I think it was one of the people on Letterboxd, where they were like, basically, Nic Cage might be the worst part of this, or the best. He's definitely, like, I think without Nic Cage in it, it would be, I think it would just be considered so much differently than it is, just because now, because you're like, oh, it's a Nic Cage movie. If it was someone else, like if it was like Patrick Wilson, you'd be like, oh, it's like an interesting little indie film.
Yeah, I feel like this movie, like in its bones, it could have went many different directions, and it sort of did, but like it could have been super, super trippy the way Enter the Black Rainbow was, or Beyond the Black Rainbow was. Or it could have been like even grosser, like Cronenbergian.
Yeah.
But
it kind of reminded me of Hellraiser in parts, like the goopiness.
Definitely. It reminded me of Alien. It reminded me of a lot of stuff. And good stuff.
Yeah.
So I just want to bring up one story that this movie reminded me of a lot about Nic Cage. And that is The Shining, right? So when Stephen King heard they wanted to cast Jack Nicholson in The Shining, he's like, no, that's a horrible idea. Right. And he said, because Jack Torrance is supposed to be like a normal guy in the beginning. And he's supposed to be very like everyman, and then he slowly goes insane. And so the person he is at the end is like surprising. But if it's Jack Nicholson, like the minute he's on camera, you know he's going to flip out. And I felt the same way with Nic Cage, because even in the beginning when like everything was chill, he was still pretty fucking weird.
Yeah. Well, and like, it's funny, that actually reminds me, I also saw that Nic Cage based especially his car freak out on Jack Nicholson in 5 Easy Pieces.
Yeah.
Which is funny. But yeah, I do not agree with Stephen King's take on The Shining, that it's like bad, but also it's his story, so he can feel about it however he wants.
I think it's a great movie. It is a bad movie based on The Shining.
You do?
Like it is. No, I just mean it's like not. It has a very different message than The Shining. Like, it is not an adaptation of The Shining.
Sure.
It is a sort of like play off The Shining.
I mean, I definitely think it's better than the Stephen King version with the talking topiaries.
Yeah, no. I mean, at the end of the day, Kubrick is Kubrick, and Kubrick's gonna Kubrick, you know? So I know we both have many questions about this movie.
Yeah.
Why don't you start them off?
Sure, yeah. So what's up with the alpaca milk? Why did we need a whole scene of Nic Cage milking the alpaca? Did he call them boobs instead of teats just to, like, gross me out? I think so. Yeah.
It was very Luke Skywalker purple milk moment.
Yeah, I did not like it. And then I guess the alpacas are like a part of the story, but I was like, I don't know why we needed that whole scene. I don't know.
The alpacas were a choice. We kind of went through my first question, which was the meta question of, is it okay to still make movies about H.P. Lovecraft stories? But
yeah, I mean, it's one of those complicated things.
It is.
You know, like,
I mean, I grew up, like, he was one of my favorite authors as a child, so.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Lovecraft thing is weird. I mean, it's it's one of, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like he is no longer alive and not making money off of this. So
Right.
that's part of the good thing. Like, I'll feel better about renting, you know, or rewatching Woody Allen movies after he's dead. You know, there's
Hopefully soon.
I mean, he's old as fuck. But yeah, so there's like one of those things where it's like, and you know, like you were mentioning with Lovecraft Country, I mean, I think that there's a way to like take these stories and use them in a way that honors people's interest and love for them, but then also like kind of uses them in a way that probably would have made H.P. Lovecraft mad, and that's fun.
Yeah.
Like,
well, apparently this is the first in what Richard Stanley wants to be a trilogy of H.P. Lovecraft movies.
I hope so, because he took like a 20-year break from movies, or maybe it was longer than that. It was quite a while. So my next question is this meteorite and alien entity bisexual? Because the lighting really seems to indicate this. There's a lot of bisexual lighting through this whole movie. And if that's the case, then, you know, I kind of want to welcome this doopy meteorite to the bi club. You know? Yeah,
I mean, I think anyone touched by it could no longer sit in a chair normally, which is a huge bisexual marker.
That's true.
You become very close to your mother? I don't know. It's true. I like the way they use color, although the big thing about the book, I mean, the story, which is sort of explained, the titular conceit is it flashes a color that is not any color that human beings have ever seen before.
Right.
And so a big part of it is
not in Roy
like,
G. Biv. Yeah.
Right. People are trying to explain, no, it was like an indigo. It was kind of like indigo, but more.
Yeah.
Just inside baseball, was Ward's character a nod to Dexter Ward, which is another Lovecraft character, which is involved in the next movie that Stanley wants to do, which is the Dunwich Horror.
Yeah, I saw that. And then also, like, there's a character in Dunwich Horror named Lavinia. And
yeah.
The other thing, too, that I saw was that his name is Ward Phillips. And H.P. Lovecraft's name was Howard Phillips Lovecraft.
It's true.
So that's one of the things that I'm like, well, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like a, I don't know, I kind of like to see it as a fuck you to his dumb racism, to like have this kind of the only survivor in this movie be a black man that has his
That's
name,
true.
part of his name. Like, I thought that was kind of cool.
My next question is, was this movie Dasani propaganda? Was this by Big Water Bottle?
Oh yeah, I bet, or like Smart Water. Maybe Jen Aniston is actually like one of the producers.
Yeah.
Uncredited, because she wants to get Big Smart Water some more of that money. Yeah. It's definitely a scathing indictment of well water.
It is, which I think is long overdue.
Yeah. We haven't been talking enough about the dangers of well water.
Well, that's what
so
this
my last
podcast
question
is about. Yeah.
My last question is that Science Guy, also known as Ward, is from Arkham, and they reference the city of Arkham. And so I know that Arkham was a Lovecraft thing before it was a Batman thing, but is this a side door opening to make the Richard Stanley Lovecraft trilogy part of the DC extended universe?
Yes.
That would be cool.
It would be cool. Yeah, there's a lot of Lovecraft footprints in Batman in a variety of ways. But it was also interesting in the weather report, it had, because there were a bunch of weather reports on TV in this movie.
Yeah.
And they had like, and surrounding areas, including Innsmouth, Dunwich, and like they're all fake Lovecraft cities, so it was kind of very steeped in that world.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, because, we were talking about the Lovecraft influence on things, because, I mean, obviously, all of the Lovecraft elements that are in, like, D&D and video games, and, like, it's, his stuff is in a lot of, like, pop culture and spread across a lot of different mediums and genres. It's kind of crazy.
Well, not only because of his work, so he was one of, like, the first, well, I guess this happened in Victorian times too, but so he, like I said, he was this man of letters, and so he had this huge circle of writer friends, and a lot of them started writing in the same world and using the same sort of, like, elder god names and cities and stuff. So it became it was bigger than just his stuff, but he also was, like, extremely prolific. So
yeah.
I think a lot of people born in the 50s, which is, like, most horror writers that are popular from the, 70s on, were hugely influenced, and so was comic books, and so was lots of stuff. So
yeah. So, since we were talking about Ward and some of the other characters, who were some of your favorite characters in this?
Well, the movie opens with Lavinia doing this pagan ceremony, and, Ward comes by and he's like, oh, is that, Wiccan or Alexandrian? And,
oh, yeah.
But so when I was a teenager, I was very into Wicca. And it's funny because their last name is Gardner, and Gardner is sort of the father of, modern neo-paganism in some ways. So, and just, like, her whole, like, little purple hair thing and not wearing shoes and the tattoo on her foot. It was all, like, I feel like she was a girl that I would have dated when I was 17.
Yeah, she had her little manic panic hair do.
Yeah. And I liked Ward too, and I liked their little flirty thing, although he seemed like he was in his mid-20s.
Yes.
And she was in high school, I believe.
Yeah, the kids' ages were kind of hard to pin down, because, like, I couldn't tell if they were actually supposed to be in school or what. So,
they all seem very homeschooled.
Yes. It was sort of a weird, and it was also just, like, it seemed like they were in New England, but, like, they were way out in the middle of nowhere, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Arkham is supposed to be in Rhode Island, so I think it was, like, Rhode Island or Maine.
Sure. So I really liked Ward. He has a great monologue voice, so the opening and closing little monologues were better served, I think, by his voice.
Which were from the books. Those were both from the book, yeah.
I kind of figured. I wasn't sure, but it seemed like that was probably the case. Also, fun note, Jack, the youngest boy, is played by, his name's Julian Hilliard, and he's amassing kind of a good horror resume. He was in The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, and he's also in the upcoming The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And most recently, he played Billy on WandaVision.
And he was wonderful.
Yeah. So I also really liked him. But the cast overall was great. Like, I mean, there's the whole Nic Cage element, which we already talked about. Jolie Richardson played Teresa, and I think she did a really great job at a really weird and kind of gross role.
This movie, while it was very big in a lot of ways, it was also, like, super nuanced. There were, like, a lot of things going on, like the whole cancer subplot and, like, the, it was just a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And then there was, like, there was the mayor, who's played by, I think it's pronounced Koryanka Kilcher, who it just seemed like a really kind of bit part to have, like, I don't know. So that role was a little weird because I was like, what's going on here? But then Tommy Chong plays their squatter, Ezra, which I love how they just toss that off as if it's a totally normal thing, that there's just like a guy that lives in the woods and his name's Ezra, and which is fine, but then they call him their squatter.
Right.
I don't know. It was kind of an interesting
Who also
dynamic.
has like all of these cameras set up and like it's a lot of very weird stuff. And basically that character could have just been Tommy. Like they could have just said Tommy Chong lives out back.
Yeah, truly.
And it would have been believed. But yeah, I think it seemed like I'm guessing maybe there was something cut out with the mayor, because they were sort of implying that, so behind all of this, there's also like they're building a dam, or they're going to build a dam, and there's some water company that Ward was sort of hired by.
And she was like, you should have let me buy this property.
Right. So I think like she's like in with the company or in the pocket of the company.
Right.
That's what I got from it.
Yeah, it was sort of not developed, which didn't matter. There was so much other stuff going on. I was just like, oh, what happened here? But
I was going to say, though, like we mentioned this before, but it really, especially talking about the cast, like Nic Cage really does, he just influences this movie so much. And like any other actor, this is just such a different movie. And it's like, it's kind of like, would it be a better movie? I don't know.
Yeah, he does a little bit like suck all the air out of the room. Just like anytime he's on screen. But yeah, he's definitely like, I don't know. Anytime he and Jolie were like kissing or getting intimate, I was like, no, I don't know why. I don't want to think about Nic Cage like fornicating. It's
doing
like,
it.
It's, I don't know why, but it's so gross.
When the mayor comes by and she's like, what happened? He's like, well, I was with my wife and it was the first time we'd been together since the operation.
Yeah.
It was just like, what the
Yeah, that was it was a lot.
All right. So tropes and cliches.
For sure. Mostly around like the alien entity and yeah.
And in general, like, I think a lot of these tropes come from H.P. Lovecraft, which I don't know if you listen to my solo pod about the Ghostbusters, you'll remember that I think it is the most successful H.P. Lovecraft adaptation because it's basically about a cosmic horror coming to Earth. And so in this, you get a lot of the same sort of... So in Ghostbusters 2... there's this ooze, this purple ooze under the city, which sort of reminded me of. It was a purple ooze that
there's
was psychotropic.
Well, that's sort of like the big bad in the TV show I love, The Expanse. Also, is like a alien plasm that is weaponized. I also, a recent movie that this reminded me a lot of was Annihilation, which is where sort of some sort of meteorite or something, I think, has landed on Earth, and it's formed like they call it the shimmer, which is just sort of like a big dome, and inside of it all of nature is changing, which is sort of a thing in Colorado Space, like
absolutely
the bugs and the flowers and everything that start growing.
Yeah. And then similarly, like ingesting some alien thing and it changing you is very, Aliens, Prometheus, that whole vein.
Franchise. Yeah. Yeah. And like, on that note, like when Jolie and her son start like globbing together and she's like a weird spider creature, it kind of reminded me of that scene in Hellraiser when Frank is like coming up out of the boards and he's just like a weird, he looks sort of like a spider or some creature on four legs, but he's all goopy.
That's like a Cronenbergian sort of thing. I've used the word Cronenbergian twice in this podcast. That's pretty good.
Yeah, you should trademark it.
But like people fused together and like, people trying to claw their way out of their horrifying existence. And then Star Trek does that, it reminded me of a transporter accident. What was these transporter accidents? So I see here on my schedule that we're going to talk about Stephanie's recent theater horror experience.
Yeah. So, BTS note, I've done all of my vaccine. Everyone, please go get your vaccine. If you're at all hesitant about it, reach out to your healthcare professionals and get more information. But I encourage everyone to get it. I think anywhere in the United States, if you're 16 and up, you're eligible. But I'm done with all of my vaccine shots, and so I've been going back to the movies, and it's so nice. I missed going to the movies so much. It's like my favorite pastime. And so I saw my first in-theater horror movie, I think since probably like Paranormal Activity 2. Like, I just don't really go see horror movies in theaters that often. So I saw In the Earth at iPic Theater, which is like a fancy schmancy theater in Manhattan. And they're all, at the time, I think now they're at 33% capacity. At the time, they were 25%. But, so this was a horror movie that was filmed during the pandemic. And it's pretty much all shot outside, which, so it's like there is a scientist who is going to what seems like a nature preserve because his other scientist friend went into the woods and no one had heard from her in a while. So he's paired up with like a park ranger type person, and the two of them go into the woods to find her. And while they're there, they get kind of waylaid by a guy who sort of reminded me of Ezra, the Tommy Chong character, except not benevolent. And there is a lot of sort of like folk horror stuff that's going on. And the seams show a little bit where like you can tell it was filmed during the pandemic, and they kind of reference a pandemic throughout it. But I think it was effective. There was way too much flashy lights, but I guess overall my takeaway is that I think horror is just such a good in-theater genre, because it's, in the same way I think like comic book or like action movies are good theater experience, because one, it's the spectacle, but it's also kind of like feeling the vibe of everyone else that's watching it and like getting kind of shocked at the same time, or excited about some action sequence or some horrifying thing. And yeah, so I think it would be fun to do more of those. So I think, kind of as time and availability allows, maybe we'll try to incorporate some more new releases as time goes on that we're able to see in theaters.
Yeah, we talked about the fact that The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is coming into theaters early June.
Also, your favorite, Quiet Place 2.
Quiet Place 2, The Quieter Place.
And then the Candyman remake as well, which I know we are both into.
Yes, definitely.
So.
Yes.
That one I think is a definite, I'm going to say live on the pod, which is not live, that we're going to do the new Candyman when it comes out.
Yeah. Let's do it. See it at Alamo. Back to our stomping ground.
So, what is your Jack pitch of the week to bring color out of space into a serialized format?
All right. So, this weird thing happened. We're in a little town in New England. The water supply is corrupted. Who do we call? We call the FBI, but the FBI doesn't care, so they push it off to Mulder and Scully. Mulder and Scully come into town. They start investigating, and it's a crossover. And radiation burned animals, family that committed murder suicide. They find a now jaded ward, and they investigate what's in the water, and they're hounded by some corporate security and the mayor and all this stuff. And then, something happens with the water, and then it has a strange effect on Scully, maybe. And I'm just spitballing now. So maybe like Scully gets very like aroused by the water, and then she starts like dressing much more scantily, and then she gets this idea that she needs to go to New York, to Brooklyn, and then Scully and Mulder go to Brooklyn, and then they find this guy who's really cool, and his name.
Yep, I think we got the idea.
Yeah,
I think
but
we're
it could
good.
be a sort of like,
I think you're gonna have to
erotic-
pitch this to Skinamax.
I think it's gonna pitch a tent. All right. Stephanie, what is the horrible idea?
What is it? Well, I think you've got a much more thorough and better take on this than I do. I was kind of too overcome by the activities of Nic Cage to really formulate a thesis, but so I'll let you take this one.
Well, I think like all H.P. Lovecraft, it's about the universe being unknowing and alien and dangerous, and all of the petty problems. Your wife has cancer, the kids are being annoying. It all doesn't matter because the faceless cosmic horror that existed before you and will exist after you destroys your inconsequential life, because that is dead which can eternally lie, and with strange eons even death may die. Quote by H.P. Lovecraft, also quoted by Metallica in The Thing That Should Not Be. Great cut.
Rock on.
One of 3 Metallica songs that is about H.P. Lovecraft. Final reactions.
Yeah. So, I liked the movie. I did not like the finger chopping.
It was a double. It was a double take.
I could feel that one coming. She was chopping for a very long time, and she had a weird look on her face, and I was just like, I know this is coming. There was also there was a lot of kind of disturbing images, the daughter Lavinia self-harms at one point. It's supposed to be part of a ritual, but it's really icky. And there's really mutated and mutilated animals, the alpacas especially. There was, and the mother-son reassimilation was super gross. But there was also some humor in it. So there's at one point where the mom is reassimilating the son, and Lavinia is like, I think she's reassimilating him into her body. And then the other son, Benny, is just like, don't say that. As if it's just kind of a normal thing to say. And then Lavinia goes to her and she's like, do you want some water? I know it can kind of be written off as they're also affected by the alien thing, and so they're sort of not freaking out about this, but I would be like, I'm not witnessing this. I'm leaving. And I know Lavinia tries to leave a few times, but anyway. It was a good mix of kind of gross and scary and kind of oddball funny. The visuals were really cool. The opening cinematography, while Ward does his voiceover, was really great, of the woods and everything. So I would say scare factor, I guess I would give it probably like, it's like a scare/gross factor. I'd give it probably a 7. There was some really gross stuff in here. And then entertainment factor, I'll also give it a 7. I think it probably could have been like 20 minutes shorter. Cut out the alpaca boob scene. But yeah, I enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I felt like it could be 20 minutes shorter or an hour longer. Either one. But yeah, the beginning cinematography was really lovely. And there's a lot of these sort of symmetry things where, Lavidia was wearing this triangle shape in her hair. And then it showed her mother who was sitting in front of this triangular shaped window. And, it was just like your classic good movie making technique. And, just had sort of like good bones. Like the tension was good. Even when it was, like the finger cutting off thing where like, yes, I know the movie was so weird. I thought they would actually, I like when a movie uses that sort of building tension to then do something else, which is, Wan sometimes did that to good effect, but Spielberg is like one of the masters of that, where you build up tension in one thing and then you do something else. I thought the CGI bugs kind of pulled me out of it a little. The movie was so weird and so sort of artsy in some ways in the beginning that I think if they went hard on that and they just did like weird in-camera flares and maybe did some more of that sort of Alien Jaws thing where like you don't ever really see it until maybe one part, but I would have liked that better. But I liked it. And yeah, it was scary. Like I was creeped out and freaked out a bunch of times. And the mother-son fusion
freaked out.
It did. The mother-son fusion was like unexpected.
Yeah.
And like it lasted a long time. Like
yes.
Usually something like that in a movie would be like, "Oh my god, they're fused together," and then they like die. But no, it's like drag it up to the attic. It's like chain it up. Yeah. And then when he threw his daughter in, he was like, "Feed your mother."
Ew, that was so disturbing.
It was very creepy. So
yeah, I didn't like it.
Scare factor, I wrote 4 here, but I'm gonna bump it up to like 6.
Yeah, it was
and
pretty.
Entertainment. Yeah. And entertainment factor, I will give it a 7 as well. And yeah, I liked it, and it makes me like excited to see what the director does next. I'm like curious.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't, take another 20 years off. I don't know if he has another 20 years left, but he's totally got like an interesting vision and visual style.
2041, The Colors from Outer Space. We're going to do it.
Or the Dunwich Horror.
Yeah.
Horror. So next time on The Horrible Idea, we'll be talking Trey Edwards Schultz's It Comes at Night, which is, I believe, available on Netflix. And
nice.
In the meantime, if you could give us a review on Apple Podcasts, we greatly appreciate that. It helps drive people to the pod. But we're also on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you might be listening. Don't be scared.
Don't be scared. Yeah, I moved, and so we've had a little scheduling weirdness, but shit happens. If you have any interesting facts about It Comes at Night, a movie that I definitely won't make fun of the title of, or you have a suggestion for a movie that might scare us, let us know on Twitter or email us at thehorribleidea@gmail.com. And now, Stephanie, do you want to give us your best Nic Cage freak out?
Does he say cocksucker or motherfucker? I think he says cocksucker. I think he's like, cocksucker! Cocksucker! Ah! 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 And then banging on ceiling of car. And then I love that at the end he just says, the car isn't happening.
The car isn't happening. Do you think the director just said, okay, now just do to freak out?
Yeah. He was just like, go mental, do
your thing.
You know how in Vampire's Kiss, when you read out the alphabet? Do that in the car, but just yell expletives.
Fair enough. All right. Ciao.
See ya.